Ursula Guin is a Northwest author best known for her science fiction novels, especially the Earth-Sea trilogy and The Left Hand of Darkness, although she also writes children's stories, short stories, and poetry, and is a regular contributor to such publications as The New Yorker and the newspaper Oregonian. Mrs. Le Guin lives and works in a house in Portland, Oregon that she and her husband, Professor Charles Le Guin, bought 25 years ago to raise their 3 children in. We met in her living room to talk about the creative process. Hello, Ursula. Thank you very much for having us here. If you were describing yourself to someone, what sort of a writer would you say you are?
A book writer.
A book writer. Well, all right, but what kind of stories do you tell? How do you describe them? Because there is some...
I write so many different kinds of things. I was first published as a poet, and then as short stories, and then novels. And I still do all 3, and now I've done some script writing. So I just write anything that's there to be written.
You like to write?
I like to write.
Yes. Well, you didn't spring like Athena out of the head of Zeus. How did you get to be yourself? Where did you come from?
Berkeley.
What was your family? What was your growing up?
Well, I had a professor of anthropology, and a mother who became a writer late in her life, after the age of 50, and 3 older brothers, and a very happy childhood, with a lot of interesting people and a lot of books and a lot of general vitality around the house.
And what sorts of things did you do as a child?
The things kids do, plus writing.
Plus you were started off very early writing?
Yeah. As soon as I learned how to write, I started writing.
How did your parents react to that? Or
They just sort of took it for granted. It was fine with them, but they didn't make any fuss about it.
Did they read you things?
Yeah, sure. I showed him stuff. And they were always mildly encouraging, but they did not go into raptures and fall on the floor, or anything.
And how about school? How did you get along at school?
All right.
What was the problem?
I was a shy child, introvert child who was, stood around and felt embarrassed at school a lot of the time. I didn't like school until I got to college. And then in college I found there were other eggheads,
Well, and then you could decide what you were going to do more, too.
Yeah, you are a lot freer once you're through high school.
One of the things we're exploring on this series is the whole what keeps a person creative, because most children are to some degree, but not all of them manage to do it for the rest of their lives. Supposing someone who has a child that they think has got some particular talent were to come to you and say to you, I think I have this child with talent. What can I do to help the child realize its abilities?
I guess basically approval, support, and admiration, but intelligent admiration. I mean, we had a musical kid, and neither of us knows anything about music, and we were very dumb about what to do with her. So I know exactly how a parent who has a child who is doing something they don't understand very well, you sort of try to educate yourself. Your child is going to educate you in that case, which is very exciting for everybody, and very pleasant really for everybody. And you just sort of, you try to figure out what the kid needs to go on with whatever this gift may be, whether it's, for music or athletics or gardening or writing or whatever,
You take it seriously. And
you take it seriously, and and sort of go along with it.
And did you decide to be a writer, or did you discover that you were one? When was the turning point where you knew this was it?
I think about age 5.
You weren't tempted anything
I never
else?
said I want to be a writer. I said to myself, because I was too shy to say it to anybody else, I am a writer. I just took it for granted. That was one thing I was going to do, and I always did.
Well, you're early on. You were a science fiction writer, primarily.
That's what I first got published as. Well, I first got published as a poet. For years, was able to publish nothing but poetry. Everything else I wrote came back from the editor with a little printed form that says, "No, thank you, we do not need this material," And where I first broke in was as a science fiction writer. They got onto what I was doing.
The editors began to understand you.
Yeah, because I've always written kind of dingy stuff, stuff that was hard to categorize. A lot of what I write that is published as science fiction is probably not properly science fiction even, but it doesn't matter. Science fiction is a very open, generous field where you can do all sorts of stuff.
Well, I noticed it seemed to me that in your articles about science fiction, somewhat of a frustration with being in a category. Do you feel some kind of?
Well, it cuts both ways. If you're put into one of these pigeonholes, a genre like romances or science fiction or westerns or mysteries, a lot of readers and a lot of the serious critics and reviewers will automatically not even read your books. So you're cut out from a certain amount of dialogue and a certain amount of readership because people automatically assume that if it's science fiction, it's got to be lousy, you see, that sort of thing, which is very unfortunate and rather stupid. It's changing because now science fiction is being taught as simply a branch of literature, which it is, in a lot of schools and colleges. So all that is changing, and that's the bad side of the coin. The good side is that if you're a science fiction writer, you have a large and intelligent readership ready-made.
Yeah, well, you have fans, so you have a fan club after
and they
you.
write you letters. They respond to the author much more than most readers do. And so you get immediate feedback on a book, which is great. And they say, "This was lousy, that was good." So, and most writers are so cut off from their audience.
Yeah, that was something I was going to ask you about, because it seems to me that very few people have that kind of support, waiting for out there with bated breath for their next book.
It's great. And there are many intelligent readers who have read a lot of this sort of stuff, and they know when you're faking, they know when you're slacking, They keep you. Another group like that is adolescents. If you write young adult books, they do not let you get by with faking. They see through it. And they'll write and tell you so.
How nice.
Yeah. Not always nice, but exciting.
Well, I mean, for you to have this exposure and a sense of reaching people.
Yes, of really communicating and hearing back again, so you get a real sense of audience.
So you said something about yourself as having been a shy child. Is the writing partly a way of talking to people?
I suppose so.
And it's worked.
Yeah.
How do you work? I think a lot of people who, when they stop to think about creative people, think it's sort of like a 24-hour golf game or always going fishing or something. What is it that you do?
It is funny. People, particularly writing, I think, people do assume it's something you do in your spare time.
Yes.
It's kind of, I do my housework in my spare time.
Yeah.
Well, these days when the kids are grown up and out of the house, I sort of get to my desk between 7 and 8 in the morning and leave it between 12 and 1 because 4 or 5 hours work, if I'm working hard, is all I can do anymore. When the kids were home, I worked at night because you cannot do real artistic professional work and be looking after kids, be responsible to and for kids at the same time. There's no way you can do that. So you get them to bed or whatever,
But it's not a mutually exclusive possibility for one person to do both. Or is it superhuman?
One person to do both is pretty hard. If you've got a supportive spouse, and I mean truly supportive, so that she's got her job, he's got his job, and they've got their job, which is child rearing and housekeeping. And that's precisely what my husband gave me, was that kind of really genuine, generous support with no strings attached. So that is quite unusual, but it does work. 2 people can do 3 full-time jobs, yes.
Yeah, that's a very good way to put it.
But I don't think one person can do 2 full-time jobs. Women kill themselves trying to do that, and get into so much rage and anger and guilt about it that if you don't have this kind of partnership, then you've got to get some kind of hired help or childcare. I think is the only way to do it.
If you're going to keep
if you're going to have a family and be a full-time artist too, yeah, or professional of any kind, really.
Well, and you have to keep it going, because if you're going to wait till they grow up, it's going to be hard to step back into your own life.
It's very hard. But there again, my mother apparently did not wait to be a writer and didn't sit around itching and fretting. Mm-hmm. But as soon as she got rid of all of us and we were all off raising our own families, she sort of settled down and started writing and published one book, and then her second book, Ishi, was, of course, a bestseller and is a permanent classic now. Mm-hmm. Well, she was, I guess she was getting on around 60 by the time she wrote Ishi. Mm-hmm. So she started in her 50s. That's very unusual, but it's not impossible.
Had she been writing all along, too?
No, she hadn't. I asked her once, I said, did you suppress all this while you were bringing us all up and so on? And she said, no, I just sort of had it in mind that someday I would start writing. But she seemed, as far as I can see, she felt no resentment or anything. In a way, I'm sorry about it. I wish she'd started sooner and let us look after ourselves, because she was so good. She would have had 20 more years of writing. But she did what she did, and she sure did it well.
Well, and she got herself, five children into the grown-up world, and that's an achievement.
Indeed it is.
So, Well, we were talking about how you work, and one of the questions that interested me would be, and I'm sure our audience, how do you take your actual experience, can you give us an example, and turn it into a creative fiction piece? Have you got a story and then what you made it into?
With me, experience goes in and it goes down so deep. It's kind of like making compost in the garden. Mm-hmm. You put in all your potato peelings and stuff, but by next spring, when you get the compost out of the heap, you don't know the potato peelings from the orange rinds, because everything has been transformed into nice brown dirt. This is the best.
That's
all I can think of. I don't know where my stuff comes from, and people always ask, where do you get your ideas, and so on. And I have absolutely no answer to that, because they come out of me. Obviously, they came into me at some point, but I don't recognize them.
But you don't have a conscious moment in which you say to yourself, oh, this, and this happened to me, and if I fix that up a little, it'll work here.
I don't do that. Many artists do.
Many people do, yes.
But I'll tell you, I think there's a slight sex difference here. I think men are more likely to do that than women. Because I think women are a little more cautious and careful about not hurting other people, not using other people for raw material. I just have a feeling that in much writing that I see, a lot of men novelists seem to sort of pride themselves on, telling about their love affairs and stuff like that, and telling about actual people, whereas I think there's a slight tendency, I may be wrong, but that women would rather let it go down and be transformed and come back up unrecognizable. Because they have a little more sense of responsibility, perhaps, toward these people, their family, and so on.
In your books, you do have a lot of ideas. They're not just stories. Not that that's not wonderful. A story is wonderful, but they're about ideas.
Story is basic.
And one of the ideas is about being a woman and what does it entail, and we're kind of getting into that in this. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What is the difference, and what does it? How do you handle it? I guess we'll start from there.
I don't know. It's changed so much. I wrote a book back in the '60s called Left-Handed Darkness, where I was first asking myself, okay, what is the difference between men and women? And the means I used to talk about it was to invent a race of people who are androgynous, fully androgynous. You only become sexually active once a month, and you may become active as a man or as a woman. You don't know which. So that everybody is part of the time non-sexual and part of the time either a man or a woman. So then when no one is a man and no one is a woman permanently, what's left? What remains that's human?
What is a person?
What are they like? Mm-hmm. Yeah. So it was a sort of thought experiment, and I played around with that. And I guess I've been, every now and then I come back around to the same subject.
Well, that's what I partly mean about playfulness. You have a short story in which the people are a dominant species, and so are lions, and so are cats, and they play them. You play them off against each other. To me, that's a form of playing.
Oh, sure. All art is playing.
Okay.
Yeah, like dancers. What do dancers do? They play with their bodies.
With themselves.
Yeah.
So you're exploring what is the nature of a woman and what is just being a human being. Would you come up with, what are you telling? Have you got a message for women right now?
Oh, gee, I don't like to do messages because I am a storyteller.
Okay.
The story is the message,
Right.
and you can't extract fortune cookie things out of it.
Okay.
I would just say that the whole women's movement of the late 60s and 70s and 80s has simply, I'm just grateful to it. It has just enabled me to go on as a person, as a woman, as a writer, where I think I might have been getting stuck without it. It's just the way of thinking that they've given us and the sort of sense of solidarity and so on has been very important to me.
A form of validating your own experience, and did you feel that need to have?
And the sense of solidarity is also very, very necessary, I think.
Is this in a direct associations that you have made, or just in the knowledge that it's there?
The groups, but also the writings, feminist literature, both fiction and the splendid criticism and so on that's coming out now, a sort of different way of understanding writing and literature, a different way of coming at it, a sense that women have their own way of writing which has barely been explored, because a lot of us, well, I started out writing about men like a man, as much like a man as I could, unconsciously, but that's the way writing was done. And you don't have to do that anymore. And, this is not to cut oneself off from men in any way. Men can read women's writing just the way women can read men's writing and be enriched both ways. We've impoverished ourselves because we've sort of had a male standard. Now, if we have two standards, we're that much richer.
I'm hearing you say that women writers really do write differently than men writers.
Well, I think they can. After all, they do have a different life experience.
Okay. Not necessarily, they don't have to, but they can.
Yeah, right. No, good heavens, they don't have to. And nobody has to write anything they don't want to. But the fact is that women do experience life differently, both in their body and in what they do, than men do. And that we haven't explored that very well yet. Men have tended to set the standard of writing, of what is written about, of the structure of the sentence, and so on. Virginia Woolf talked about this a long time ago now. And that we are, and also what is sort of respectable in the way of writing. For instance, I think we're beginning to discover things like the kind of diaries that women keep and so on, which have been ignored, and some of which are absolutely fascinating, but they aren't like anything else, and so they have to be sort of understood and talked about. And this is where this feminist criticism I'm talking about has been very exciting to a lot of us, because it simply, again, opens up new ranges of art, of expression, that have been sort of neglected. So it's just a matter, again, of enriching life.
One of the things I've most enjoyed in reading books of yours is the fact that your lady characters like their children and seem to have a feeling of joyfulness and about the magic of children, which is really not very often described. I think many women writers never had any children. Anyway.
A great many didn't. That's why Margaret Drabble's so interesting, the English novelist, who has 3 children, and all of whose books, I think practically every one of them, involves women with children and children with mothers and fathers and so on. And this is not very much written about. It's true.
Well, and very few people seem to think of that as a wonderful, that the children themselves are interesting and fun. You know, it isn't just
that they're human beings. Yes.
pain and suffering and all, and feeding them and all those
Yeah,
things.
right. They're not just a burden or something. Yeah. Right.
Yeah, I would very much like that. But I have noticed, it seems to me that your more recent books are both getting more accessible and a little more haunted. How are you seeing, if you have a feeling about what's the future of mankind or something that's beginning to surface?
Well, yeah, but I'm not sure I want to go into that. My most recent book is the one that's coming out next fall. And that is pretty different from anything else I've done, because what I did was not only sort of come back to earth, but come back to the place where I grew up in Northern California, a piece of land that I am enormously fond of and have gone back to all my life, and use that as my setting, and used it very closely and literally trying to sort of give you a real sense of place. But in it I have put a human group, a small people, a society who don't actually exist. They're invented. So I'm sort of crossing realism with science fiction, or whatever you want to call it, in a fantasy, whatever, in a sort of a strange way.
It's a book that takes place after the world has blown itself up, sort of, or is it just in no time either?
Well, I say that these are a group of people who might be going to have lived in this valley of Northern California. It's not a post-Holocaust book, because I think post-Holocaust books are profoundly immoral, because they all say, let's all go have a picnic after the bomb drops, and this is ridiculous. This is grotesque. There won't be any picnics after the bomb drops. So I don't know quite how to put that.
Well, that's the answer.
I'm
then
saying there are alternative ways to go. You see, I cannot commit myself to that. Most futures, people say science fiction is about the future. Most science fiction isn't about the future. It's simply a sort of alternative world.
Yes.
And it's not a serious prediction. There are some people in science fiction who say they are predicting what they think is going to happen, but most of us don't. We are simply saying, what if the world went this way? What if this happened, And you're not supposed to take it seriously as prediction. So I would claim that exemption for my book, too. On the other hand, it certainly is a statement about the way I wish things would go, in a sense. Because, and it's a celebration of this piece of the earth that I love very much, and it's a kind of celebration of the kind of people I like, too. See? So it's a very happy book.
Because it is, yes, that is, your short stories is what I was thinking of. But tell more about that, because it's like a Bible of these people. It's got their songs.
Well, it's more like a collection of their literature. And it also, you see, it has a tape of music. It'll have a cassette tape right with the book.
And we're going to play that at the end of the program.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, Todd Barton of Ashland wrote their music, you see, and Peggy Chodos of Eugene drew pictures for them. So the whole thing is sort of a... Well, this is sort of a celebration.
It's got poetry in it.
I put everything, if I could have had small dancers coming out of the covers, I would have done that, too.
They do a lot of dancing.
Yes.
Well, there was a lot of dancing in a lot of your books. Did you ever dance?
No, I can't dance and I can't sing worth beans. And so there's a lot of music and a lot of dancing in the books. I think writers put in things they can't do. I can't sail boats either. I can't go to Antarctica. But people in my stories do those
Get
things.
there.
Yes.
Well, to get back to the book, it's about a woman and her life.
Yeah, the main part of it is this sort of life story of a woman tells her own story and her adventures.
And it's more than her interior adventures as well as her physical adventures. And we ought to say the name, because we will be getting this program out about at the time that people might be able to find it.
The book is called Always Coming Home.
Why is it called Always Coming Home?
Well, for about 38 to 60 different reasons. which I won't go into
Try
all
three.
of them. But one of them is, of course, that for me it's a homecoming. I am literally in the book always coming home to where I grew up. The woman whose story is the main part of the book, she has to leave, and she comes home in various senses of the word.
So there it is, the case.
And, yes, and then of course the book is not called Being at Home or anything like that. It's called Always Coming Home. There is a sense of unfinishedness also, I think, in the title.
And that will be coming out when?
September or October. They haven't decided, but so somewhere, say, end of September probably.
Well, you have a sense of having developed in your point of view, your philosophy. Where is it you feel you're coming to now, yourself, as you write? Is it changing from something to something else?
It's always changing. And that's the joy of it for me, is I never really have done the same thing twice. But I never know where I'm going next. I honestly don't. I love working in the media, in television and film and radio. All that I get great pleasure. I get tremendous pleasure out of collaborating with artists in other media like composers and dancers and so on. So I hope I can go on along those lines. But of course I always hope there will be another novel somewhere down the line.
It has to cook a little while in that
Oh
compost
yeah,
heap.
I spent 3 or 4 years on this last book, and I think there has to be a little layoff too.
Well, we certainly enjoyed talking with you very much. I think that the time has flown, and people who are watching can see that the creative personality is kind of fun to be. I would think you might say that.
Yeah, so long as the work's going well, sure.
But do you have the feeling when it isn't that it will tomorrow?
Oh no, oh no,
Oh,
when it
no?
goes, oh no, I'll never write again. You know, never talk to an artist when things aren't going well.
Well,
They-
some
they've been
people
told
know
this
that
by
tomorrow it will get better.
Well, gee, I wish I was one of them.
You're doing fine the way you are. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brent.
It's been fun. Okay.
Kailiku, gilihu,
Gelehu, kailiku, kailiku, diu,
kailiku, gili,
diu, kailiku,
para